we probably need to get started. Everybody's filtering in a little late from lunch. Welcome. This is the Across the Transect from Historic Preservation to Composting session. We have 4 presentations, sort of like speed dating, so we'll get through it rapidly and hopefully have time for questions and comments, and we'll probably move that conversation out into the hallway so that the next session has time to set up and get things going again. This is the Open Innovation track. If you're not already connected, innovation@cnu.org, email to contact. Also follow on Twitter, #CNU Open or at #CNU20. This is registered for 1.25 hours of AIA credit or 1.25 hours of AICP continuing education credits. For AIA, they have to do the sign-in sheet deal, as I'm sure you all know, and for AICP members, you have to search the website for the planning.org website for event number 19209 for a list of all the sessions and tours at CNU 20. And without further ado, I'll turn this over to our first presenters.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Unfortunately, I'm not really good at speed dating, so hopefully this is not going to be as much of a disaster as my last dating episodes. Today, we would like to talk a little bit about what the Prince Foundation has been doing in the Galapagos Island. This has been an effort, a joint effort actually, from several people, including about 50% of the room that's here. But before we start with that, I just want to talk a little bit about what the foundation does and then give you a quick, brief introduction of the Galapagos Islands so we all know what we're talking about. The Prince Foundation, one of the things that we do is we always try to work on every project that we do based on a sustainable vision. This sustainable vision, of course, is composed of 4 elements. We have the financial sustainability, meaning the possibility of people being able to work in the same place where they live. The second one is the natural sustainability, meaning being able to use a lot of the natural resources around the area and, of course, not deplete them instead of using them correctly. The social sustainability, which actually is all about the social interaction between the different generations, the places that allow that to happen, including the sidewalks and all of the public parks. And of course, the build, or the sustainability of the construction of the buildings, meaning that the buildings themselves actually are type of buildings that, that sustain the test of time. Not only that, but also are very ecological in their construction. This is actually what the Prince Foundation always sees as the 4 main components of what a sustainable development, sustainable place actually it's made up. And so this is the base. Basically, this is the same pillars that we used in the Galapagos Island during the charrettes that we have been working on. Just to give you a quick idea, that's the Galapagos Island. That was a quick flyover. Galapagos Island is quite far away from mainland Ecuador, but Christina is going to talk a little bit about that. And I think I'm going to turn it over now to Christina, she is one of our a local architect in the Galapagos Island, born, bred, and raised in the Galapagos Island. And okay, well, yours?
As Peter said, the Galapagos Island is located about 600 miles from the continent as part of Ecuador. In the early 90s, a lot of people started moving to Galapagos because of the tourism. And the islands were not ready for all this increase of development. So all the population started to grow without any control. Right now, there are 4 islands that have people living there. And this is how we get all the material and most of the food and all the things we need to the islands from boats that come from Guayaquil to the islands. And this is mostly what we get every day, 4 or 5 planes to Santa Cruz. This is the one airport. We have 2 airports in Galapagos. And this is the look of the airport every single day. And this is one of the roads that goes to Santa Cruz. That is the island that have more population in. So a lot of people actually think that Galapagos just have nature and animals. but it's not the reality. When I was talking about all the growing without control, this is what we get. All these spaces that actually use with empty spaces that have garbage, a lot of buildings that are not finished. And this is mostly the typical architecture we have, because a lot of people start building the houses, they finish one story, and then the next story they just leave it there. If they have more money, they will finish someday. Or they usually think, if my daughter someday will grow and marry, I can give her the next story so she will finish it. That's the look we have. So one of the worst and really sad thing about Galapagos is that we don't have potable water or any sewage system. So mostly the houses have septic tanks that actually are contaminating all the sources of water we use in the houses. And this is one look of the black water and gray waters go directly to the ground and contaminate the water we use in the shower, in the kitchen, and also the sea. So.
But you know, it's not all that gray actually, because the Galapagos Island, out of all the 150 islands, there are only 4 main islands that are populated, and out of all these islands, only 3% is actually where people are living. The other 97% are actually completely preserved by the national park, and so that's why you get a lot of the wonderful things that you find only in Galapagos. They are wonderful animals that are very unique. This is a marine iguana that it's funny because sometimes you can't even tell them apart from the rocks. But the funny thing is that they themselves are fighting with each other, and mainly because they're fighting for space. And it just so happens, for example, sometimes they, like in one of the islands, they built an airport exactly where the sea lions used to nest and all that. So now the sea lions, of course, are going someplace else, and they're fighting with other animals. So it's quite an interesting fight. But yet, nevertheless, it's amazing the amount of nature that it has. It's quite resilient. And that's why, you know, the Princess Foundation decided to go ahead and try to see what we can do to help them out and work with them. And hopefully create this type of unity, this type of harmony between human and nature that could happen, you know, and it has happened in other places, but that's what we're still working on in Galapagos Island. Everybody knows this, but what's so interesting about this transect plant drawing by Humboldt is that it is actually of South America. And it is actually near Galapagos Island. And so if out of all the places in the world, the best place actually to try something new, like the transect, is in Galapagos Island. And so that's why we went ahead and took on this challenge. And, you know, this is just, you know, a quick example of course, of the natural transect. And believe it or not, this is something that we've been talking to people about in the island, including the national park, you know. Very simple transect, natural transect, but how it actually correlates perfectly well with the human transect. And so what we've done actually is that we've come up with our own version of the transect that basically what it does is that it actually changes just the district, because the district goes back, for example, into nature. Or the district in Galapagos Island is actually the marine area, which actually happens to be the port and actually happens to be where most of the goods come from the mainland. And then what we're doing in terms of the Princess Foundation, aside from, you know, the normal, you know, transect, the streets and all that good stuff, which I'm going to show you some image of it, we are taking the transect yet one step further. And what we're doing there is we're looking at coexistence, and coexistence between people and people. And, you know, the graphs that Andres is always showing about the relationship of, you know, nature to urban areas. Well, in this case, is that coexistence. What we see is that obviously it's a higher coexistence between people and people the closer you get to a more central area, to the more urban area. And of course, part of that coexistence also is people to animal. You know, Galapagos actually is composed of 28 different cultures from around Ecuador. There are 28 different languages that they speak in Ecuador, so it's quite rich. But at the same time, they all don't look at each other, they all don't talk to each other, speak to each other in the same language. So it makes it quite a bit of a challenge in that sense. So that's why we're working with them to create actually a coexistence code, so people understand each other but also understand nature and the reason for nature. But aside from that, we're also looking at tourism. because tourism is the only reason why people are going to Galapagos. And if they continue going the same path that they're going right now, what's going to end up happening is that all the animals, all the nature is going to die off. And like I always tell people, well, nobody's going to come to Galapagos to take pictures of dogs because they could go anywhere else for that. So that's why we're looking at tourism, and we're looking at the type of tourism that happens in this town center, which is a very urban type of tourism, but then also in nature, which is why people do go to Galapagos. But even in the transect, actually, this application of what type of tourism happens, it correlates incredibly well. The other thing that we're looking at, and this is something that actually Paul is helping us out, is with sewage. We are actually tackling the issue with sewage in Galapagos Island, little by little, island by island. And what we're looking at is obviously the more urban you are, the more of an active system you can use. The more out in the rural area you are, then the more passive system you can use. For example, you could use a septic tank, but you'd need about, what, an acre, I think you said? About an acre for that ground to actually take everything, all the contaminants, and clean up correctly, which means that you can use a septic tank in the more urban areas. So that's where you start looking at other systems, like more active systems. So even the sewage system, we see that it actually connects very, very well to the transect. And of course, the food growing, which we all know, in farmlands and the rural area, but more in the urban areas, we're looking at even food growing in boxes and also in their yard, rather than just having yards that actually don't function and don't do anything. And so I just want to show you two different islands. This is one. This is the first charrette that we did, and we did this charrette about a month and a half ago. And this place is called Floriana. This whole town here, it's basically has 150 people and 8 dogs and a couple of cats. But what the story with Floriana is that although this is the main town, actually all this land here has already been sold to people. So in total, they have 150 lots already sold, and people are just waiting to see what's going to happen. Go ahead and build. So before that horse leaves the barn, what we decided to do is try to tackle it by start working on a transit-based code. And actually, I'm happy to announce that this is the first transit-based code for the Galapagos Islands. 154 people, like I said, but you know what? Hopefully it's going to do something good in the long run. And this is actually a map of Floriana that we did during the charrette, where we tried to create a little bit of the tourism and how the tourism actually can be linked to the history of Floriana. This used to be the place where the pirates used to go and hide their treasures. So it has a very rich place history. And this is actually where Max Zavala has been helping us a lot, working on the code for especially for Floriana. But this is basically the whole entire island. And what you're seeing here is that the whole island is actually T1. And this is real T1 because nobody can actually go in there and touch it. But then the highland, which is this area here, historically that's where they have had the farm, that's the T2. And then the rest that is in white, that's what we're going to look at now. But basically, this is the town. And in the town, we started looking at all the transect zones, and we went from T3 to T4 to T5. But, don't think of T5 as in like, a humongous house. Where we're talking about T5 is more like a 2-story or 2-story and a little tower, and that's it. Because this is 154 people at the end of the day. And what is quite nice, actually, is that we were able to do a transect base in one little spreadsheet. That's it. It was done. It was great. And it was so funny because we did it in, actually, Max, he did it in 3 hours. I mean, we actually had 150 people in the room doing this thing in 3 hours. And the whole town was present. For the final presentation, I'm happy to report we had 6 dogs, so 2 of them were missing. But what was really nice about this is that when we started with doing the codes, the guy from the president of the parish of Floriana said, but this is going to take a while. And I said, no, this is going to take us about an hour. I mean, it took us 3 hours, but that's because we actually chatted a lot about different things. But one of the concerns that they had, and again, goes back to conservation, is that in the area of T2, you want to make sure that the lot area, the minimum lot area size is 10,000 square meters. And the reason for that is because therefore you're able to lock all that space into just farmland. That's it. And then obviously you want to have more density, more in the T5, so therefore you go down to 350 square meters. So, I mean, that was a big fight because a piece of land over there, where right now, some people buy it for $3,000 like 10 years ago, right now it costs $15,000. So they could easily make $12,000 in about 5 years. So that's how fast things are moving, and a lot of people from outside coming into Galapagos Island hoping to buy that land because they know that it will turn into gold in no time at all. And then the second island that I just would like to show you is called Isabela, and this is the town of Puerto Villamil. And actually, we happen to have the director of the planning department from Isabela, Ana Cristina. She's sitting back there. Hello, Ana Cristina. Sorry to embarrass you. We found your camera, by the way. Have you found it? Oh, no, we have it.
You have it?
Yes. She left her camera behind and we stole it from her. So, Puerto Villamil is actually one of the worst cases. I mean, Floriana is 154 people. Here we have 2,000 people. But the sewage system, actually all of the pictures of the horrible sewage system is out of here, out of Isabela. And it's not her fault. She just started about 2 months ago. But what's great is that we did the charrette a month ago here in Isabela. And basically, the whole town, the council and the mayor, they all voted to adopt basically everything, all the different things that we were proposing to do and changes. So actually, during the charrette, of course, we started with our pedestrian sheds, which is amazing because over there we cannot do the 5-minute walk because 5 minutes under the sun, it's hell. So actually, we brought it down to like 30 seconds for me. But for most people, actually, we kept it at 2.5 or so. But what we did was we started looking at the existing town. And again, we looked at the town as if it was completely grown because all this area here is still not built. But we still wanted to make sure that we had coded for everything. We looked at the streets, the different type of streets, and then we started thinking about how is it that we're able to change the streets to make the streets real like Isabela. What is interesting here is that nobody uses the sidewalks because the sidewalks, they're concrete and they become incredibly hot during the day. But everybody walks in the sand, and this is a sandy street. So what we said is, okay, don't do anything, don't make the sidewalk bigger. Instead, what you do is you very simply add 4 meters here, where you plant some trees here, and that is an area where the bike and the people can actually walk and go under shade. And they liked it. I mean, that's a very, very simple, cheap intervention, pretty much. And they liked it and they were happy with that. And then you have 6 meters in case you want cars. This is another one. This is actually a much wider road. This happens to be a 12-meter wide road. And the same thing, we said 3 meters on one side, 3 meters on the other side, and have trees on both sides of the road. And that way you basically have 2 types of sidewalks. You have one where you get your feet burned, or 2, the sand one, which you'll be able to walk like a normal person without a problem. And then the other thing that we pushed here was to change all of their cars for electric cars. In Floriana, they actually wanted to do this. And so now we're working with the regional government to adopt and to implement that, how to change 14 cars in the island of Floriana, take them out and bring in electric cars. In Isabela, we're going to be working with just the municipality because they have, I think, 4 or 5 cars that they're going to change to electric cars. So the talk is already there, and so that's part of the plan that we're doing. Unfortunately, in Isabela, we still have to work on the code, but we're going to go back to work on the code, and we already have been asked even by not only the mayor but also by the attorney of the municipality, because this is the conditions that they have in Isabela at the moment. Basically, unfinished construction, like Christina was saying. Basically walls that, back here in the front, that's supposed to be like a 3-star hotel, and then they never finish the back wall. They don't care about people in the town, they just care about themselves. Or, of course, what you normally have, which is the transect shift of 3 stories to 1 story. And this is a wonderful image, actually. Mike Watkins is also somebody who has been working with us in most of the Galapagos Islands. And when he saw this building, he freaked out because he said, I wonder how long that building is going to last. There is no column underneath this whole wall, which happens to be a structural wall that is holding up above. Whereas this is more of an island architecture. Believe it or not, you don't need AC for here. Here, you have to have air conditioning. So again, it goes back to conservation and preservation and all that stuff. Obviously, what we're trying to do is bring this type of architecture back into the islands. And this is one of the quotes that I always like to use, obviously, about our president of the Princess Foundation, just because it goes, no, you haven't seen that one, stop. Just because it goes back into the whole idea of this society, the throwaway society that we're at. Believe it or not, in Galapagos Island, 30,000 people are already that throwaway society. believe it or not, they actually buy things that are made in China, very, very cheap. And at the moment, if you go and you get a little gadget, a little pen or anything else, it says Galapagos on it. If you look very closely, it still says made in China. They do go into that very cheap type of mentality, but that is something that we are hopefully working with, and we have a great team actually that's helping us to do that. And at the end of the day, it's about these guys. It's about that nature, and it's about making sure that, that we keep these guys, because this is how we see as being part of that sustainability of that society and the financial sustainability, is that if these people lose the natural beauty of Galapagos Islands and the relationship with the animals and stuff, people are just going to go someplace else. Because to have bad water and bad hotel and bad service, I could just go to London for that. But so anyway, so I think that's my presentation. I think we made it on time?
Yes.
Right. Who's next?
Is it Composting?
Not standing on ceremony, folks. Let's move on to the next presentation.
Hello. Thank you so much. Oh, I should speak to the microphone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for having us and organizing this. My name is Jennifer Siqueira. I'm here with Hector Burga, my partner with UpLab. We're a nonprofit design studio. Let me see, how do I do this? This volume. Next. I think I have a remote.
We're being sabotaged.
Wait.
There.
Wait, but I should. There you go. Okay.
Does it work?
Okay. I got this. So UpLab, we're Urban Projects Collaborative, a Miami-based nonprofit organization. We're a design studio focused on socially conscious design, planning, research, and creative activism. And the reason why we're here today is to talk about composting. We started an initiative called Compostmobile, which focuses on collecting food scraps from households throughout Miami. Eventually, we'll grow beyond Miami to South Florida, the Tri-County, and who knows. Let's see here. I have some notes. Basically, I started this idea of collecting food scraps because I had some friends coming to me with their food scraps, and they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't want to just dump it in their regular garbage can, so they approached me because they knew that I was associated with various community gardens throughout Miami. Back in 2006, 2007, I got together with a group in Coconut Grove and started a community garden in the west part of the Grove. Basically just with the idea of claiming public space and creating something that's more productive than an empty lot. At the time, I was just basically doing this on my own and reached out to a nonprofit organization called Architecture for Humanity based in San Francisco. I'm sure most of you know what that is. And I started with the community garden. Basically was the launch of the Miami chapter of Architecture for Humanity. And since then, I approached Hector, and he decided, it would be a great project for UpLab, not only because of the effort, which is a green infrastructure project, but also because there's a lot of research that that surrounds just the idea of composting and implementing it in the citywide kind of approach. So. So after that was back last summer of 2011. In the fall, we were invited to teach at FIU. So since we're both affiliated with architecture and the architecture department at FIU, Florida International University, for those of you who are not familiar. So we got our students to do a little bit of research to see how our waste stream was presently working in Miami, and also to see more specifically how the food waste stream was being diverted or being directed to our landfills. And we discovered a lot of data that surprised us. Basically, we have 50% of all our waste is food scraps, or not food scraps, but organic waste. And only 1% of that is recyclable, is food scraps that's being recycled. We had a lot of numbers that you can see here in this, but I can go over more in detail with you guys outside afterwards. We have quite a few bits of facts and information to go over. But anyway, the numbers were pretty surprising, and what was most surprising was the fact that there wasn't much collected data. Information wasn't really well organized, and it seems like there was just a big void that needed to be filled. And as UpLab, we felt like it was a great place to be in, to sort of try to figure out how we could help divert a lot of the food scrap waste generated by so many households from our landfills. And our students got a little creative. We're architects, so we like to be creative with our graphics. This may not be very technical, but it does give you the idea or a little bit of synopsis on what composting entails. There's the hot composting type, there's the cold, and there's also municipality-wide efforts that could take place with larger equipment that cost a lot more money than what you can do in your backyard or at home. So anyway, we continued our efforts with Compost Mobile, and we felt that one of the most essential parts of developing the program was to make sure that we educated the public to understand, for them to understand that we do need to recycle our food, and this is one of the only things that we can do. We may not be able to afford these big machines that actually recycle or compact plastics or paper or all other waste that we generally produce, but with food scraps, it can start in your own kitchen. If you yourself get your a little composting bin or bucket and put it in your fridge or on your kitchen counter, then you're already doing your part. And the next thing would be for Compost Mobile to come and pick it up and bring it to the recipient farm, which is the next part that I will talk about. That's me. I forgot to tell you my background. I have been trained as an architect and work as an architect full-time right now for Strang Architecture. But I do sort of fluctuate between different roles now and then in the name of community engagement and creative activism and the social good. So this is me here campaigning about Compost Mobile and how people can help our environment by just collecting your food scraps in your kitchen. This is in the Coconut Grove Farmers Market. Back in the fall of last year, we also got a grant from the Awesome Food Foundation. So with the money, we started investing in our campaigning or promoting. So we generated some flyers that could educate the public on what it is that we do and what composting is. So this is our first attempt at that. And we have basically two services. One is a pickup service, and the other one is a drop-off. I'll talk about the other one. We work with the local farmers markets, which are drop-off locations. So basically, you separate your scraps at home and you bring it to the farmers market. And Terry, or apprentice, with a local nonprofit organization called Youth Lead, is basically their youth apprentice. Let me backtrack. The organization Youth Lead, they create jobs for inner city youth, at-risk youth. So basically, after school, Terry will now has a job. Basically, on Saturdays, he goes to that farmer's market. He, after everybody has dropped off their scraps, he collects it and takes it to a local community garden located in Little Haiti. The farmer's market is located less than a mile away. So he brings it to the farm, and we'll dump it into this compost pile. And then the farm, there are volunteers in the farm, thank you, who will actually turn the compost, and in a full moon cycle, you get ready, good fertile soil for the garden. And in the garden, the garden itself feeds people who live in this farm, and also the locals from the neighborhood. And this is a low-income area and considered a food desert, and Hector will get into that in his part. And that's me. I'll just go that over quickly. Before Terry was around, I was the one doing all the turning of the food scraps. And this is a friend of mine, just showing how easy it is to compost in your own kitchen. You can put it in a bucket and put it in the fridge, but you can also just put it into a compost keeper, which allows you to keep this bucket outside on your kitchen countertop. And for a week or 2 weeks, you can leave it in there. It has a carbon filter that filtrates, that actually expedites the decomposition process, and will not smell. I guarantee you. You can ask my roommate, who's a type A, very about keeping your house clean. Sorry about the word usage. And here are just some examples of what's going on around the country. Actually, one of our students, I should have put that image here, she's from Taiwan, and she was teaching us about how in Taiwan they already do this, and most of their buildings are already designed to take this program, or programs such as this, into account. So it makes it easier. I mean, not only are you just collecting or separating your scraps in your own kitchen, but also the building itself makes it easy for you to just dump it in a separate bin or pipe that goes directly into a food scrap container rather than the regular trash can. So we have examples in DC. We have a guy already riding his bike as well in, where's that? Boston. Several places, especially in San Francisco, which is an example. They already have this as a city-wide effort. So why not Miami? And we're going to show you, I don't think we have, never mind. We were going to show you a little video of Terry taking the scraps from the farmer's market to the farm, but I don't think we'll have time for that. Hector is going to go more in detail into Miami 21 and how this all relates back to why we're here. So.
Hi, my name is Hector Burga. I am a co-founder of UpLab. Oh, this is a little tricky. I'm also a PhD student at UC Berkeley in City and Regional Planning, and I was a Knight Foundation Scholar in 2003, back when Peter was around at the School of Architecture at UM. So the reason why we're here is because we need your help. We need to figure out how to plug this into Miami 21. When Jen came forward with this idea, my first reaction was, Jen, that's great and wonderful, but there's a code. There's an existing code that needs to be addressed, and there's a lot of interesting things that could be innovated upon with the practice that we're developing. So just to give you more, this works this way? Okay. Just to give you a clear understanding of how we approach these things. We are a non-for-profit, we are architects, but we're also trying to bring urban innovation to Miami. In these particular sites, which Jen has described, and these are very specific sites. We like them very much. We approach them because of their problems, basically. There's a lot of racial inequality in these sites. There's also a lot of poverty that exists along the trajectories of the routes that we are proposing these sites on. One of them is in the Upper East Side, bordering Liberty City, and some of you from Miami may know this area. And the other one is the West Grove, a Bahamian neighborhood that is actually in the neighborhood of Coconut Grove in Miami. So what happens basically is we have set up a system that Jen more or less described, in which you go from one location to another. There's pick up and drop off. But by doing this, we're actually crossing some of these lines that have to do with inequality. As you can see, here we have, this is data from Dade County Planning Department, and there's a lot of differences here in terms of racial inequality. The percentage of ethnic difference is very much akin to some of the inequality that deals with poverty here. And what we're trying to do here is, in a sense, provide some sort of economic development that can arise in this practice. We're from the beginning, starting with this pilot program. But in a sense, there's also a possibility of bringing people from one area to another one, of being able to exchange goods, produce, and also use composting as a means to provide those new trajectories among people. This is the other neighborhood. And we go from, once again, pick up from one location to drop off in another location. And once again, some of these differences that are very poignant in Miami. This is part of our scope as a non-for-profit, is part of our mission, and is very much part of what we're trying to focus on. It is also interesting to note that some of these practices are not new in Miami. They're actually happening, and they're happening in many different locations. This is actually a picture that we took today in our site, collection site, in the Upper East Side next to a net office. So there's already some stuff happening actually with the city, and we see this as an opportunity, something that we can evolve from. Some more stuff happening. So what we basically did is we approached Francisco Garcia, the city of Miami, and we said, Francisco, we have this interesting project, can you help us? And we started a relationship which right now is evolving. We are reviewing some of the legislation from Miami 21. There's a possible urban ag proposal that is happening that we're helping them with. And we found out a lot of interesting stuff. And we're continuing this process. We came out with a first review, and we came up with a whole set of different questions that deal with Miami 21. One of them has to do with nomenclature. There is this use of the term urban garden, which is really fascinating. And we're trying to see how that term remains general within the transect. Urban garden specifies a particular zone in the transect, but it may be confusing for people that come and use the transect in a suburban zone. There's also this tension between the urban garden versus the farmer's market nomenclature. And this is something that we're also thinking about. How can we come up with a comprehensive term? And the garden also implies a tropical garden, like Fairchild Tropical Garden, which is a very much an emblematic space in Miami. We're trying to come up with different hierarchies of terms. There are obviously hierarchies of agriculture, urbanism, such as in the book that Andres Duane has written. And those are very useful things. But we're thinking about other possible terms. I'm sorry, don't move my mouse.
No, it's this one.
Oh, okay. Is it? Oh. And, how can we come up with better terms, basically? No, it's okay, don't worry. Oh, it's moving? Yeah, you can leave it there. Sorry about that. There's also this idea that some of these uses may be permanent, or they may require infrastructure. And how do we deal with that in the Miami 21 form-based code? There is the possibility of working with public spaces versus residual spaces. The Miami 21 form-based code has a very specific lot-based designation, but we're looking at other possibilities. The issue of externalities is one which is very huge, obviously. And let me just continue quickly here. And there's obviously other precedents that are very important for us. We have 3 scopes that we're developing at this moment. One of them deals with education. There is a huge need to educate the public, not only about urban agriculture, but also about Miami 21. We're thinking about this as a plug that is a user-driven Miami 21 approach. So not just the planners, but also people like us or anybody else who has ideas coming to the planners and saying, how can we work with this? What do you think about this? How can we push forward some sort of legislation? And lastly, also this notion, which is how do we make government, particularly planning, more transparent, more accessible? The passage of ordinances or legislation through Miami 21 is a very political process, but also is one which can be useful and it can be democratic, and we're working with the city in order to impose that. So anyway, these are some of our ideas, and I think that's it for us. Oh, there we have one more slide. These are just some of the principles that we work with. We go, idea of design from master plan to a small-scale intervention. The idea of coordination from one to many. These are things that you may have heard in other places. The idea of innovation, architecture is a powerful force for that. Envisioning design not just as a form-based approach, but also a systems-based approach. And something that is very much our core of our practice, which is justice, which is architecture can be a form of activism too. Thank you so much.
see it because we don't see that.
Left, right. Okay. My name is Alexander Adams, and I'm with the City of Miami's Planning Department. I was one of the managers in Miami 21 in producing the ordinance. So that was a little bit of an intro there to some of what it looks like and all. And I was asked specifically here to speak a little bit about how historic preservation, which is the job that I now have rotated into, and how that applies into the Transect and how that applies into CNU. Sometimes CNU has not paid maybe as much attention and has been criticized for being sort of the same, whether you're in St. Louis or whether you're in Florida, with architecture and other items. So first of all, starting with what they've said previously from the Galapagos to their project to Miami, here we had, across the Transect, we do still have actually some natural areas in Miami. And this is a picture of 1930s Flagler Street in Miami. And then that was 2010 in the recent economic boom of Miami. Okay, so first of all, why change? And I'm going to go through these quickly. This is more Miami 21, and you'll be able to get this on the website when they have the presentations. But we did look at it from a standpoint of conservation and development, and that these two didn't have to always be fighting with each other. That these two could be neighbors, they could be working together. But the image on the right is just a typical grocery store, suburban, wherever. And we were getting all these blank walls, dead streets and everything. Of course, the Transect, they mentioned already. One of the things in Miami 21 that we introduced was this idea of successional zoning, which was brand new. This was the idea that you couldn't jump transects. So if you're in a T3 area, when you rezone the T4, and T4 rezones the T5. You can't just jump from T5 to T6. But I also think that historic preservation needs to be plugged in across the board, I would say, at CNU. And I'll show you how we plugged it in. In Miami, this is our transect of both the city of Miami on the top and Miami-Dade County on the bottom. Just a brief from left to right, T1 to district. I'm going to quickly go through these. These are what we came up with in the city. And of course, for our city, most of it is in the T6. And you can see we're going from, essentially, these are T6, 8 stories, 12 stories, 24, all the way to 80. So then these were the districts. Districts were essentially anything that doesn't fall in the rest of the transect. That could be your hospitals, government institutional, that could be workplace. We did introduce light industrial as a live workspace, and civic institutional was the University of Miami Health District, which is a major employer for Miami. This is the uses. One thing we have to remember is back to the old real estate attaché here, that location sells real estate, and whether we're an architect or whether we're a developer or whether we're planners, we are in the real estate profession, whether you like it or not. And location does matter for your city and for where your place is. CNU talks a lot about the sense of place and the sense of neighborhood and the creation of good areas. And this is where CNU's been the most successful and probably publicized the most, is they've sort of transitioned or changed this planning process on its head from use and density to form, and they switched it upside down and put form first and the permitting and use and density on the back. This is a generic of the city. This is development by decade. The blues are the older areas, the greens and orange are the newer. So you can see how it followed out of the city. But you'll also see a lot of the inner city is gray, which means it's either been redeveloped or it's vacant land. So there's been a lot of turnover in the city. This I won't go into much, but most of our historic districts are in the Upper East Side. And if you look at the land use map, it just happens to be the Upper East Side. Well, I won't say happens to be, but correlates that that's the most consistent area. You don't have as many different land uses and competition and a lot of speculation in a lot of these land use. How does it fit together? This is my words of how I think it fits together in CNU. You know, the Congress has their charter, sort of the Constitution. The Transect is a theory. We need to remember, you know, the Transect is a theory. They always say it has to be coordinated to your local area. We did switch that zoning from what I said, use-based to form-based, so that's been good. The design guidelines coming out of all of these studies and charrettes have been great. But this last part is probably where we can still have some implementation, building on the past. And I think this is where historic preservation sets in. We also have a series, if you want to say, the U.S. government standards by the Secretary of the Interior. And then I think this is real key here. Every locality has design guidelines, and I think Andres said there's like 14,000 planning departments across the country. I mean, every historic district has design guidelines, and I don't think that CNU or architects are looking at this area. They've historically kind of competed with historic preservation. This is a big area where you could have new business. This is both Washington, D.C. and Austin, Texas. This is what we call facadectomy, where you sort of just cut off the front of the facade and you build something else behind it. Some are done better than others, but this is the last case resort. This is in Coral Gables. They tried to mimic some of the features into the new building, and on that side you can see Miracle Mile. They kept the low scale and the bigger buildings in the back, but I think there could still be a better transition here. This is really what we're looking at. This is the authentic urbanism. This is in Austin, but could be anywhere. This is more of the goal, if you want to say. This is a very interesting picture from Miami Beach, and I put this in here because this is in a historic district, and this is a brand new building on the left, but if you notice the way they integrated the lines of the building, they integrated the heights in all of the building in a brand new architecture. But if you look close, this is a double-story retail space. If you look close, the lighting and all. And the upstairs is residential, whereas next to it is all residential. A very good adaptation, adding an extra story. This, they added 2 stories on the top, actually. Here's much better transitions and keeping the street. This is Kissimmee, Florida. What most people know on the right is the drive to Disney. What they don't know on the left is if you make a right-hand turn there, you actually hit a historic district, and there's a real city back there. And then this is, I think, more of we need to go and get real cities. This was my honeymoon, actually, in Switzerland. We need to not just replace the transit, but actually just build upon the city. I think this idea in Miami especially, you know, if something's 15 minutes old, it's historic. You know, it's old. Get rid of it. Tear it down. We should build and layer the cities, and that's where historic preservation can do that. And we can do more, I think, at CNU, partnering with others, partnering across disciplines, across areas. And this is our information, if you want, for the Preservation Department, Miami 21. So, all right, great.
That's you? Yeah. And your little thing was here somewhere.
Can we put that up there? Will that reach up there?
Yeah.
Do one up there?
Sure. Can it go on top of it? Okay, this is like the world's weirdest session. Because, I mean, I don't know how I got in here, but I'm going to be talking about something that's not that related to the other ones, but hey, innovation at the margins, right? That's what we're all about. Okay, so Sandy and I are talking about two different approaches to coming up with transect zones, and I'm going to give the geek approach. And this is, how do you take an existing city and figure out where the transect zones are? It's a process that's very nuanced. Often, Andreas tells me he'll look at a map and he'll just pick out where the transect zones are and we're good to go, something like that. There's the Synoptic survey that Sandy's going to be talking about. And I'm going to propose a system that's very GIS, data intensive, geeky, mechanical, and I don't want to suggest that this would be a substitute for walking the street and really knowing viscerally what's going on. But I think that planners, with all their wonderful data that they have, can go through a process like this that I'm going to show as a way of augmenting and maybe just bringing an additional piece of information into the process of looking at the transect basis of a city. So this is my geek approach. I worked with a student, Amanda Bossi. She did most of the work, actually, I have to admit. Most of the geeky work. So with some very basic GIS data, parcels and attributes for those parcels, particularly land use, and having blocks, block perimeters, block sizes, and then a streets layer. And with this information, assuming that included in that parcel's information, you also have something about environmental sensitivity that you can at least surmise. So here are the steps that we went through, and I'm really looking to get feedback and critique and no, don't do it that way, because this is a work in progress. So first of all, this is very Ian McCarr kind of thing. Get out of the way the preserved open space and the reserved open space and remove those. Designate T1, T2 based on that. And almost every city has a layer where you would be able to figure that out. Step 2, just go through the process of determining some basic morphology. So here you're really looking at your data and you're putting it in a format that you can use for your transect zone delineation. So thoroughfare types and coming up with some ideas about land use mix, environmental sensitivity, assuming that's a parcel layer that you have, and block sizes. So you're categorizing everything. Then assigning categories to blocks, you're creating these layers, and I've got 4 different layers there. Let me just show you what that looks like. So we went through this process for a 1-mile corridor around the Phoenix Light Rail. So it's, this is only part of the city, but even just doing this amount of work on this parcel database was like hugely, a huge amount of work. So we still have some way to go to automate the whole thing. But here's one layer: proximity to main thoroughfares, adjacent, within a quarter mile, not in a quarter mile. That's how you might delineate. Land use mix, we determined different levels of mix. And this is one of those areas where you could really go in and adjust what your decision rules are for coming up with these different levels. Block perimeter, I know you're all thinking, oh my God, 2,400 feet for a block is the first level, but this is Phoenix, and it's like an insane kind of structure that you're working with, so it's pretty challenging. So step 4, assign each block a preliminary transect zone. So what we did is with this information, with these layers, we just took a stab at it, and we come up with some rules for, okay, let's take proximity, mix, and perimeter, and let's just come up with some rules for how stacking those layers on top of each other, how you would then arrive at your different T-zones, and doing that. So not every block, one issue that we were confronted with is not every block fits into these categories, so you have to start kind of constrained, see what blocks fall into those constraints, then see what blocks don't match anything at all. And then it was a process of all these rules. Okay, well, if this block didn't fit, but if it was adjacent to the light rail and had a mix of level 4 or 5 and block perimeter less than 4,000, then it's going to be T5. So there's really a kind of interactive weighting kind of thing going on. So this was our preliminary transect zone assignment. We also designated civic space and special districts. You've got the airport right there. Then step 5 is about okay, now you have these transect zones, and then you're trying to have them nest within community units. And since we're dealing with the light rail corridor, we weren't looking at Randall Arendt's clustered development or hamlets or anything. It's basically the regional level units and the TNDs came up with some, okay, these are the kinds of percentages we're going for each of those. And then we looked at whether or not, we looked at the percentages that we had once we took those, we applied those RCDs or TNDs on top of those transect zones, and then we looked at what percentages we were at. And then it was a matter of, if the percentages are not within those valid ranges that you're going for, analyzing the criteria of each block to see what could be adjusted. So here we did this other process of kind of moving the metrics around. And so then finally, this was our final transect zone proposal. So
In the right colors.
that's what we were trying to do.
And how would that be used? And once you produce this, who would use this information?
Planners would eventually use this to go through a process of rezoning the cities to be transect-based zoning, which they don't have at all, nowhere near. So, where's yours?
It should be right
Oh, here you
after
are.
Yeah.
Maybe you were just doing that.
No. Let's see. Thanks.
Sam, is Grounders a baseball term?
Yes. Baseball fan. Well, first I thought of the title as being Geeks and Groundhogs, because mine is about doing the work on the ground. But then I was afraid people would call me a groundhog for the whole Congress, and so I changed it to Grounders. I know, now you guys will, but it won't be that many people. So.
We box as well.
So what Emily has taken you to is down to the community unit level, and the transect zones for a transect-based code, such as the SMART code, have already been assigned in her analysis. And normally we would be doing it the other way around from the ground, where it's a back and forth process. You're looking at what exists in an existing city, and then noticing where centers are of different neighborhoods, including downtowns, and looking at pedestrian sheds, the quarter-mile or half-mile radius, depending on from what point. And we have both pedestrian sheds in this particular regulating plan. And I just wanted to show you this in terms of, first of all, the scale at which the transect zones are typically applied, which is quite fine-grained. 2, 3, 4, 5, and sometimes subzones within a pedestrian shed, very fine-grained. And this was done by Andrews University. It was a Charter Award-winning plan and code a couple years ago in Saussure, Mississippi. And in order to determine the DNA of the code that is associated with these zones, you have to do a process of analyzing exactly what urban elements are within each of these areas. And that we call the Synoptic survey. Now, in Saussure, for this charrette, it was a post-Katrina charrette in Mississippi. Saussure is inland a ways, such that they anticipated that people would be moving off the coast in huge numbers to get away from the floodplains. At least that was the hope, that they would get out of the floodplains. And there really wasn't much of a settlement here. So to do this synoptic survey of actually analyzing existing conditions, to get the DNA, the genetic material from that place, to write it into the code, they didn't have that DNA there. So they asked the people that were involved in the charrette, and the people that already lived there, what would you like to see your community become like if it were a bigger town? And they picked Bay St. Louis on the Gulf Coast, which had been badly damaged, and Ocean Springs on the Gulf Coast, which was less badly damaged. And the teams went down there and did their synoptic survey analysis on the ground in those towns. So the DNA of those towns is being migrated to, if they ever do this, to Saussure. And so I just want to show you where this synoptic survey process fits in to the full calibration of the model smart code for local character. So there are all these, public process steps you go through typically, and what I'm going to show you is only part of that. Now, in terms of this being the innovation track, this was an innovation by Andres Duany and DPZ, taking an environmental technique into the built environment. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 20, I don't know how long, you guys started doing that. But I am going to show you a component that is more up-to-date, innovative way to do it, but it can be done very low tech. This is in contrast to Emily's, where you need some serious technical know-how and expensive equipment and so forth, and this one you just need feet and your cell phone camera. So this is an environmental technique. These are DPZ drawings that were showing the top is a transect, which is just a path or a slice through the environment used for analysis. And it was from the natural environment. And this is called the dissect, and that's looking at what's above and below the ground in the case of, we're doing it, Paul has introduced, below the ground transect analysis in the built environment also. So we're doing both. And then on the right side is what they call the quadrat, and this is an area, typically the ecologist, biologist will take like a frame made of plastic or wood, I guess, and they put it on the ground, and then within that they're sampling, analyzing what's in that area for, say, the kinds of grasses that are there or the kinds of insects they may find, and all the symbiotic relationships between them in any given habitat, right? So that's their quadrat that they're carrying around. They're not sampling an entire, watershed or something like that. They're not going to count everything that's necessary, but it's a sampling. Based on that, you extrapolate and assume that any other habitat that is like that will have that same proportion of elements. So this is, the Grounders version of measuring, and we have one of these, cheap plastic wheels you can get at Home Depot, and or you measure your stride, and you can tell who the new urbanists are doing calibration the way they walk. They have this deliberate, my 3-foot stride, pacing off, thoroughfare widths and so forth. So this was a team member in Jamestown, Rhode Island. We're doing our synoptic survey. There are blank forms available at this website, which is Emily's project at ASU. Is a really terrific resource of codes. And then there was a component that I worked on called Codes in Real Life. And you can find a link to these blank forms. They don't have to be exactly like this. You can make your own forms. But there are editable ones if you want to try it and analyze, a project or a neighborhood. And so we have the quadrat on the left. This is and then the dissect on the right side with all these different elements. Can you guys read those okay? I mean, you know, just get a sense of, you know, tree type and curb type and lot width and front setback and so forth in the public and the private on the two columns. And there's one that was filled in when there was a workshop being done in New Orleans for T3. So what you want to do is collect the DNA as evidence. So the DNA of a place is performing two roles. It's the genetic material for the code, and it's also evidence, so that later when the code is being challenged, you can wave these sheets around and say, you want to know where these metrics came from? They came from your place, and you have that proof. So it's a political tool, as well as a step along the way for you to fill in the matrix of the smart code, for example. You can also write a code from scratch with this technique. But I work with the smart code, so that's what I'm going to be referring to mostly. And we even sort of locally calibrated this sheet because instead of a median, they call it, in New Orleans, these very wide medians they have are called neutral grounds. So we wrote that on the sheet. Now here's the more recent innovation, which is Susan Henderson of Placemakers developed an iPhone app and iPad app update so that you can do your note-taking basically with your photography being imported directly into this. So there's the iPhone and iPad versions. And this is the link to read more about it. You need to find the blog entry that's called that, because the link was humongously long. Okay, 3 minutes. Thanks. No problem. So when you're photographing for this purpose, and you want to show the character of the transect zone that's been identified, first of all, you need to make that identification along with the cooperation of, or being led by, local people who will tell you what is their most beloved part of town, their most desired outcome for the code. And when you go to those places and photograph and measure and write down the types of frontages and so forth, make sure to stand to photograph. I was a photographer in a previous life, so I always have to give a little photo advice. Actually, Andres Duane gave me photo advice. Stand in the planting strip and you will and shoot at an angle and you will get the information that you need. Show a little bit of the other side of the street. Now this is excellent advice. Sometimes the planting strip doesn't get you enough information, so you can move out until what you want to be showing is private frontage, public frontage, and a little bit of the other side of the street. This is for a general character picture, and you may also want to put in some more specific, the frontage types a little bit closer. The main thing is keep your camera fairly level to the building so that they don't start keystoning too much, but and it's not necessarily important to get the top of the building in to get the character of the zone. And that these two are in Providence, Rhode Island. So, and they don't have to be technically great, but just make sure that you can see. This is my last slide, so perfect, thank you. Just make sure that you can see the information that you're trying to impart. That's the main thing. Okay, and this is the summary table of the smart code. And if you've ever looked at the model smart code, it is already filled in. And Stefanos yesterday was saying this is a matrix. It should be blank. You shouldn't be telling people kind of what the normative metrics are and so forth. I find having normative metrics in there already extremely helpful to push against and compare to. And a lot of them don't get changed and calibrated all kinds of different places. And some of them are pretty consistent across good traditional walkable neighborhood patterns. But you will find that your evidence, will require you to change some things. And essentially, you're going to be, replacing some of these cells with your new information. And you just keep the Synoptic survey itself, the sheets with the photographs, or your digital files from Susan's app. You're going to keep them. They may become appendices to the code, but they're not part of the code. You're going to be translating that information. And then after this is filled in, there you have your one-page smart code. In fact, all the way, from the region to no, we don't have the region on here. The community units to the building scale zoning, all done, and it's based on that place and that place alone. Okay. Thanks.